Hello everyone, welcome back to AppDev channel. As part of Spring Security Framework tutorials, we have written a class like this App Security Configuration that is extended from the Web Security Configurer Adapter, and we have implemented all the authentication and authorization techniques here by implementing the parent class methods, by overriding the parent class methods like configure, that is taking HTTP security for authorization, another configure method that is taking authentication manager builder for implementing the authentication based techniques. So with all these configurations and with the use of web security configurer adapter, it is all working fine for us. We are able to authenticate with in-memory users, we are able to authenticate with the database users, and we are able to authorize the different users based on the different roles and all. It is all working fine with the Spring Boot version 2.7 and the Spring Security version 5.6.2, right? So let's run this application as a Spring Boot application again and see and just to ensure that whether it is still working fine or not. Then we will see what we are going to do in this particular video. Okay, so now the container started up fine. Now let me hit the URL http colon localhost colon. I'm going to hit the fetch all service. It is taking me to the sign in page. I'm going to log in with employee user with password. So for employee user who is having only the user role, the fetch all should not be allowed. It should be allowed only for the admin role. So he shouldn't be able to see the fetch all service. So that is what the 403 error is saying. He should be able to see the fetch by ID service. Yeah. So our authorization and authentication are still working fine, right? So let me log out and try with the admin user as well. Employee slash fetch all. Now I'll log in with admin as password. See, fetch all is accessible for admin user. That is what our authorization rule is saying. Fetch by ID is also available for admin user. So these authorization rules and authentication rules are still working fine with the Spring Boot version 2.7, 2.6.6, and also the Spring Security version 5.6.2. But with the latest version of the Spring Boot with 2.7 and the Spring Security 5.7.0, right? This Web Security Configurer Adapter, which is the main class for customizing all the security for your Spring Boot application, has been deprecated. So what we are going to do in this video, we are going to remove the dependency on this web security configurer adapter, and we are going to modify this particular class so that it will work fine for both authentication and authorization, even though it is not depending on the web security configurer adapter. So let's start doing that by updating the Spring Boot version to 2.7.0. Okay. Now if you look at the moment I updated 2.7.0, if you see this Spring Security, earlier it was showing 5.6.2, right? Now it is the Spring Security is upgraded to 5.7.1. Again, the Spring Boot starter dependencies are also upgraded to the latest version, which I mentioned here, 2.7.0. The moment I added the dependencies for Spring Security with 5.7.1, if you look at this web security configurer adapter is showing as deprecated. So that is the change that was introduced. This is one of the change that was introduced as part of the Spring Security 5.7. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that class that extends that super class. I'm going to remove that dependency from it. Okay. So the moment I remove the dependency, I save the file, it is going to complain about the configure methods, because those methods are coming from the web security configurer adapter. So we removed it, then we have to make sure these methods are also updated properly so that it works fine even though there is no web security configurer adapter in your class path. Okay, even though that is not used for your security customization. So for that, what we will do is we can name this method with any name. Okay, so instead of working on the authentication part currently, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the authorization part. Okay, so in the authorization we have this configure method, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a method like filter chain. Okay, and this will return security filter chain. Okay, so this is not the overridden method now. This will be a bean. So this can be any name. Okay, this filter chain method, it doesn't necessarily to be the filter chain, you can give any name, but it should be returning the security filter chain. This will be having all the authorization rules for your application, and it can take the http security still. Okay, so the moment I add the security filter chain with the bean method, I have to return the security filter chain from here, right? So so return http.build. Okay, see this, the here we are still using the http security authorized requests and matches with the different urls and form login. http.build we are using. Okay, so we are returning http.build. If you look at that, http.build is the default security filter chain. That is what we are returning from here. Okay, so the moment I add a method that is annotated with that bean, I have to annotate that class with at configuration. Then only the container will look for the methods that are annotated with at bean, and those beans will be instantiated during the container startup. Those beans will be managed by the container. This bean will be managed by the container now. Okay, so what all customization you have to do, you do it on the authorized request on the http method. You just simply return the http build that will return security filter chain. Okay, that's all about the authorization. Now coming to authentication, right? In this particular example, what we have done, we have used the in-memory authentication, but that in-memory authentication needs authentication manager builder, right? So but that authentication manager builder comes from your web security configurer adapter, right? Authentication manager. So we are not going to use the authentication manager builder now. Okay, so what we are going to do is we are, as it is an in-memory authentication, so let me comment this particular code from here. We have to modify this block of code entirely. Okay, so here I'm going to remove this one, and I'll also remove this exception as well. Instead of configure, just configure, I'll mention this method name as configure authentication. Okay, this is not a overridden method, right? So I'll mention this as at bean. Okay, so this has to, whenever we annotated a method with that bean, right, this has to be returned, this method has to be returning something. That class will only be acting as a bean by the container, right? So that bean depends upon on our implementation. So in our implementation, what we are going to do, we are going to implement the in-memory authentication. So there is a method in-memory user details manager. In-memory user details manager is there. Okay, in-memory user details manager is there. Okay, so what we are going to do is we are going to return in-memory user details manager. Here yeah, if you look at this one, in-memory user details manager is a class, right? So we have to return it, the instance of it. Okay, so if you look at this one, in-memory user details manager is having several different variants of constructors overridden overloaded constructors. Like it can take the collection of user details, it can take the property users properties, it can take the user details, list of user details, variable number of user details as arguments. So what I'm going to do is, uh, yeah, see this one, this is the username, password, roles and all, right? All these things we have to pass as user details to this constructor. So I'm going to use this variant. Okay, this collection of user details is there, right? So a collection of user details is a list we have to prepare and pass it here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a list of user details. Okay, user details, new array list. Okay, user details is a predefined class here. Okay, next, once we have the user details, right, we have to create the user and add that user to the user details group list. So user details dot add, there is a method that takes user details arguments, user details object. So we can create an user using user class in Spring Security, and that user class will take username, email, username, password, roles, whether the user is active or not, all those things it will take. Okay, so let me go ahead and input this user class as well. Yeah, now if I look at this one, let me create a user first. So what is the user that I have imported here, that I have to see it now? So it is not importing any user, right? So we have to ensure that user is getting imported or not. See, this is importing my user class. So I should ensure that it is I am importing the Spring Security user class. So where is that the Spring Security user class available? Uh, import org.security.core.core.user details dot user. This is the class I have to import. Okay, so that user will be available here. So it is complaining about something here now. The constructor user is undefined. So the moment I add the user constructor, it is showing the different user import. It is showing the different options how you can create the user. Username, password, list of authorities, username, password, whether the user is active or not, whether the user is account locked, account expired, credentials expired, all those are variants of the different constructors, overloaded constructors are there. So let's use the first one now. So whatever the user we have used earlier, employee, that is the username. Okay. Next, whatever the password that we have used earlier, the bcrypt password, I'm going to use it now. And after the username and password, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the roles. Okay, that is the constructor we are going to use it, right? So list collection of granted authorities. So we have to create another list of granted authority type, granted authority. this is an employee, right? So employee roles, new array list, employee roles. So for this user, what is the role I am going to add for the employee user? I just need only the employee. Okay. So this employee roles, I'm going to pass it here. Okay, employee roles. So with that, there is some error here. We'll see it. What is the error? The method granted authority, add of granted authority in the type list is not applicable for argument strings because this is a list of type granted authority. So we have to pass the granted authority only, not the direct string. To the granted authority constructor, we can pass the role name as a string. Okay, granted authority cannot instantiate the type granted authority. Yeah, because this is an interface, right? So we have to use the simple granted authority. So with that, one user creation is successful. So uh, yeah, we have this user details, right? We can add this user to the user details now. So this is one user now. Okay. So if at all you want to mention another user like admin user, that also we can create now. Okay. Let's create it. So what is the username admin? The same password. Employee admin should be having the admin role, right? So we have to create another list now. What all roles the admin user will be having? All those roles we can add them to the list. Okay, I'm going to mention admin. So admin roles is there. So I'm going to copy that admin roles to here. Okay. So with that we are done. So we have the list of in-memory users in the user details list, and we can pass that user details to in-memory user details manager, and we can return it. Okay, that's all. So we are done with the modifications that are required. Okay, so now let's run the program, run the application. It's all running fine now, even with the latest version, right? Yep. So let's go back and test our application. Employee slash fetch all I'm going to try. Okay. Fetch all I'm going to try with the admin user, admin password. Looks like there is some problem with the username password authentication token. So let's check that. Here in our project, yeah, this project we have used for the JPA authentication as well, right? So here it is app user details is also extended from the user details. So for this user details only we are putting the data in the in-memory authentication technique, right? So there is some problem having this class implemented from user details and having the same class being used in the in-memory authentication. So what we will do is we will remove these two classes from the class path from this project, and we will delete them from here. Okay, now let me run this project again. It is running fine. Now let me hit the URL. Log out. Okay. Let me hit the fetch all service URL. Yeah. Now, if you see this, authentication is working fine, but there is some problem with the authorization, right? Even though, so our customization, whatever we have done in this particular method with the in-memory user details manager, it is working fine because we are able to log in with the admin user, right? So there is, even though we mention fetch all to be available for the admin user, it is still not accessible. We will see that in a while why that is still not accessible. Also, we mentioned for employee user, what is the role for employee user? We mentioned employee role. So we will mention the same here as well. Okay. Also, so here we are putting the data like granted authority. Authority is granted authority and the role they are different, right? That's what we know. We have discussed in one of our videos. I'll add that description, that link in the description. What is the granted authority and what is the difference between granted authority and role? We can watch it again if required. So the moment we are adding granted authority, we should also be calling the granted authority but not the role. There is a method has authority. Yeah. So we have to move that. Okay. Now let's run this project again. Also, mm, yeah, if you look at this one, there is some problem here. User details dot add. We're adding admin user, admin roles. We're adding, yeah, this admin roles. Whatever the role we have created, we are not adding this to the admin roles. We have to add it back to the admin roles, not to the employee roles. Okay. Now let's run this project again. Now let's see how it works, whether any problem with the authority and role still, that we will see it here. Okay, now let me run this. Let me log in. Yeah, admin fetch all is available for the admin user. Fetch all is available for the admin user. That is correct. Let's see, fetch one is also available for the admin user. Okay, now let me log out and access the fetch all with the employee user. Employee user should not be able to access the fetch all service, right? Yeah, fetch all is not available for the employee user. Whether the fetch by ID is available for the employee user, yes. All these things are working fine, right? So whenever we are using granted authority, we have to call the has authority method. Otherwise, let me call the has role. Then we will see what is the difference in using them. It's all fine. Let me hit employee fetch by ID with employee user. Yes, see this. This is the problem, right? That's what we resolve with by using granted has authority. Employee by ID is also not working even for the employee user. Now it should work. Yeah, fetch all should not be available. Right. So this is the summary. This is what we wanted to implement in our today's video, like without depending on the web security configurer adapter, which is deprecated in Spring Security 5.7 versions. So we have removed that dependency. We have removed that web security configurer from our configuration class, and we have used the in-memory user details manager for authentication. We have created the list of users and the list of roles are attached to those list of users, and return the in-memory user details manager. That takes care of the uh, authentication part, as it is being written as a bean from this method, and this class is inherited with that configuration. Similarly, authorization part as well, we have not done much changes other than using the has authority instead of has role, because we are adding the granted authorities there, right? So we have we are returning the security filter chain. Earlier it is void. With the use of web security configurer adapter, we don't have to return anything. The adapter itself will take care of everything. Now we have to return the security filter chain. So http.build will actually having returning the default security filter chain, right? So whatever the changes we apply to security filter chain, that will be returned as a bean and will be managed by the container. So all the authorization rules will be applied whenever we are hitting the service URL. So this is one of the alternative which we wanted to show as an alternative to the deprecated web security configurer adapter in the latest version of the Spring Security and the Spring Boot versions. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Please give it a like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.